Hello, hello, hello. I'm still learning how to control my voice in a way that is relaxing and inviting, and that is not helped by my cheap microphone. Actually, I think it would also help if I just spoke from the heart a little bit and a lot slower. But, I wanted to make another one of these reading videos since I think there's not a lot of them out there. Or maybe there are. I don't know. I wouldn't know where to look besides quick search. Just a quick Google or search in YouTube. I just know people reading these things to me helps me sleep, and maybe my reading to you helps you sleep. But I think I wanted to start these things off by reading some of the biographies behind the authors that wrote the material I'm reading from. I'll leave a little timestamp for those who want to cut straight to the actual poetry. Of course, I have some Minecraft running in the background. I think I originally wanted to make a stone keep out of granite and cobblestone, but on realizing that would take a lot more time than I wanted the video to be, I ended up settling for a simple pink themed cabin with all the acacia wood around. I personally think I could have embellished it more with wood fences and slabs and stairs, maybe a bit more glass or a second story, but again, I wanted to run it within a certain time without having to cut a bunch of content. Actually, I think I also wanted to build an underground house, like what I used as a temporary base. You could see where I strip mine later. But again, that would take a lot of time. Anyway, the biography of Robert Frost, author of The Census-Taker, After Apple Picking, and Acquainted with the Night, what I will be reading from. Robert Frost was born in San Francisco, but his family moved to Lawrence, Massachusetts in 1884 following his father's death. The move was actually a return for Frost's ancestors were originally New Englanders, and Frost became famous for his poetry's engagement with New England locales, identities, and themes. Frost graduated from Lawrence High School in 1892 as class poet. He also shared the honor of co-valedictorian with his wife-to-be Eleanor White. And 2 years later, the New York Independent accepted his poem entitled My Butterfly, launching his status as a professional poet with a check for $15. That's actually quite a funny little amount. Obviously, a small sum in today's money. Frost's first book was published around the age of 40, but he would go on to win a record 4 Pulitzer Prizes and become the most famous poet of his time before his death at the age of 88. So this dude lived quite a life. To celebrate his first publication, Frost had a book of 6 poems privately printed. 2 copies of Twilight were made, obviously not the vampire story. One for himself and one for his fiancée. Over the next 8 years, however, he succeeded in having only 13 more poems published. During this time, Frost sporadically attended Dartmouth and Harvard and earned a living teaching school, and later working a farm in Derry, New Hampshire. Not to be confused with Derry, Maine, the basis of it. But in 1912, discouraged by American magazine's constant rejection of his work, he took his family to England where he found more professional success. Continuing to write about New England, he had 2 books published, A Boy's Will, 1913, and North of Boston, 1914, which established his reputation so that his return to the United States in 1915 was as a celebrated literary figure. Holt put out an American edition of North of Boston in 1915, and periodicals that once scorned his work now sought it, which usually whenever something is a cult following, that tends to happen. Actually, that's exactly the definition of a cult following. They first are scorned, and then people begin to figure out that they're actually pretty good. Frost's position in American letters was cemented with the publication of North of Boston, and in the years before his death, he came to be considered the unofficial poet laureate of the United States. On his 75th birthday, the U.S. Senate passed a resolution in his honor which said his poems have helped to guide American thought and humor and wisdom, setting forth to remind a reliable representation of ourselves and of all men. In 1955, the state of Vermont named a mountain after him in Ripton, the town of his legal residence. And at the presidential inauguration of John F. Kennedy in 1961, Frost was given the unprecedented honor of being asked to read a poem. Frost wrote a poem called Dedication for the occasion, but could not read it given the day's harsh sunlight. They should have held it at night instead. He instead recited the gift outright, which Kennedy had originally asked him to read, with a revised, more forward-looking last line. Though Frost allied himself with no literary school or movement, the Imagists helped at the start to promote his American reputation. Poetry, a magazine of verse, published his work before others began to clamor for it. It also published a review by Ezra Pound of the British edition of A Boy's Will, which Pound said has a tang of the New Hampshire woods, and it has just this utter sincerity. It is not post-Miltonic or post-Swinburnian or post-Kaplonian. This man has the good sense to speak naturally and to paint the thing as he sees it. Amy Lowell reviewed North of Boston in the New Republic, and she too sang Frost's praises. He writes in classic meters in a way to set the teeth of all the poets of the older schools on edge, and he writes in classic meters and uses inversions and cliches whenever he pleases. Those devices so abhorred by the newest generation. He goes his own way regardless of anyone else's rules, and the result is a book of unusual power and sincerity. In these first two volumes, Frost introduced not only his affection for New England themes and his unique blend of traditional meters and colloquialism, but also his use of dramatic monologues and dialogues. Mending Wall, the leading poem in North of Boston, describes the friendly argument between the speaker and his neighbor as they walk along their common wall, replacing fallen stones. Their differing attitudes toward boundaries offer symbolic significance typical of the poems of these early collections. Let me see how much is left in this. I might not read the full thing. Yeah, I think the rest are just about the poems themselves. The austere and tragic view of life that emerges in so many of Frost's poems is modulated by his metaphysical use of detail. As Frost portrays him, man alone might be alone in an ultimately indifferent universe, but he may nevertheless look to the natural world for metaphors of his own condition. There we go, that's what I was looking for. Thus, in his search for meaning in the modern world, Frost focuses on these moments when the seen and unseen, the tangible and the spiritual intersect. John T. Napier calls this Frost's ability to find the ordinary a matrix for the extraordinary. So to keep in spirit of the channel, I will be reading some of the more somberly themed poems of Frost's, the first being the Census-Taker. I came an errand one cloud-blowing evening to a slab-built black paper-covered house of one room and one window and one door, the only dwelling in a waste cut over, 100 square miles around it in the mountains, and that not dwelt in now by men or women. It never had been dwelt in, though, by women. So what is this I make a sorrow of? I came as census-taker to the waste, to count the people in it, and found none. None in the 100 miles, none in the house, where I came last with some hope, but not much. After hours overlooking from the cliff, an emptiness flayed to the very stone, I found no people that dared show themselves, none not in hiding from the outward eye. The time was autumn, but how anyone could tell the time of year when every tree that could have dropped a leaf was down itself, and nothing but the stump of it was left, now bringing out its rings and sugar of pitch, and every tree up stood a rotting trunk, without a single leaf to spend on autumn, or a branch to whistle after what was spent. Perhaps the wind, the more without the help of breathing trees, said something of the time, of year or day, the way it swung a door forever off the latch, as if rude men passed in and slammed it shut, each one behind him, for the next one to open for himself. I counted 9. I had no right to count, but this was dreamy, unofficial counting. Before I made the 10th across the threshold, where was my supper? Where was anyone's? No lamp was lit. Nothing was on the table. The stove was cold. The stove was off the chimney, and down by one side where it lacked a leg. The people that had loudly passed the door were people to the ear, but not the eye. They were not on the table with their elbows. They were not sleeping in the shelves of bunks. I saw no men there, and no bones of men there. I armed myself against such bones as might be, with the pitch-blackened stub of an axe handle. I picked up off the straw dust-covered floor, not bones, but the ill-fitted window rattle. The door was still as I held it shut, while I thought what to do with that could be done. About the house, about the people not there. This house in 1 year, fallen to decay, filled me with no less sorrow than the houses fallen to ruin in 10,000 years, where Asia wedges Africa from Europe. Nothing was left to do that I could see, unless to find that there was no one there, and declare to the cliffs too far for echo, "This place is desert, and let those whoso lurks in silence, if in this he is aggrieved, break silence now, or be forever silent. Let him say why it should not be declared so. The melancholy of having to count souls, where they grow fewer and fewer every year, is extreme where they shrink to none at all. It must be I want life to go on living." A feeling of desolation and loneliness is evoked in this poem as a census-taker scouts the Badlands of the Middle East, of course. But I like how the wind is metaphorically described in the eye of the spooked narrator. I wonder if it was inspired by a trip of Frost's, though I guess I could have read the full biography if I really wanted to know. Excuse me. Anyway, another poem, more obviously inspired by his life, is next. After apple picking. My long two-pointed ladder sticking through a tree, toward heaven still, and there's a barrel that I didn't fill. Beside it, and there may be 2 or 3 apples I didn't pick upon some bough. But I am done with apple picking now. Essence of winter sleep is on the night, the scent of apples I am drowsing off. I cannot rub the strangeness from my sight I got from looking through a pane of glass I skimmed this morning from the drinking trough, and held against the world of hoary grass. It melted, and I let it fall and break, but I was well upon my way to sleep before it fell, and I could tell what form my dreaming was about to take. Magnified apples appear and disappear, stem end and blossom end, and every fleck of russet showing clear. My instep arch not only keeps the ache, it keeps the pressure of a ladder round. I feel the ladder sway as the bows bend, and I keep hearing from the cellar bin the rumbling sound of load on load of apples coming in. For I have had too much of apple picking. I am overtired of the great harvest I myself desired. There are 10,000 fruit to touch, cherish in hand, lift down and not let fall. For all that struck the earth, no matter if not bruised or spiked with stubble, went surely to the cider apple heap, as of no worth. One can see what will trouble this sleep of mine, whatever sleep it is. Were he not gone, the woodchuck could say whether it's like his long sleep, as I describe its coming on, or just some human sleep. This one is clear about the weariness of human existence and the fatigue brought on by years of living. In a few words, the human condition. Up next is another poem that's descriptive of this condition, Acquainted with the Night. I have been one acquainted with the night. I have walked out in rain, and back in rain. I have outwalked the furthest city light. I have looked down the saddest city lane. I have passed by the watchman on his beat, and dropped my eyes, unwilling to explain. I have stood still and stopped the sound of feet, when far away an interrupted cry came over houses from another street. But not to call me back or say goodbye, and further still, at an unearthly height, one luminary clock against the sky proclaimed the time was neither wrong nor right. I have been one acquainted with the night. Doesn't that one just make you feel alone? The sense of walking out from what you know into the night with only the moon above? It almost describes the feeling I love about quiet horror if you peeled back the scary stuff. A sense of being by yourself. But now I will move on to Samuel Taylor Coleridge, who wrote a series of fragments of poems, one of which I will read, as well as the Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Here's a part of his biography. Samuel Taylor Coleridge is the premier poet critic of modern English tradition, distinguished for the scope and influence of his thinking about literature as much for his innovative verse. Active in the wake of the French Revolution as a dissenting pamphleteer and lay preacher, he inspired a brilliant generation of writers and attracted the patronage of progressive men of the rising middle class. As William Wordsworth, collaborator, and constant companion in the formative period of their careers as poets, Coleridge participated in the sea change in English verse associated with lyrical ballads, 1798. His poems of this period, speculative, meditative, and strangely oracular, put off early readers, or perhaps that would be oracular? Put off early readers but survived the doubts of Wordsworth and Robert Southey to become recognized classics of the Romantic idiom. Coleridge renounced poetic vocation in his 30th year, and set out to define and defend the art as a practicing critic. His promotion of Wordsworth's verse, a landmark of English literary response, proceeded in tandem with a general investigation of epistemology and metaphysics. Coleridge was preeminently responsible for importing the new German critical philosophy of Immanuel Kant and Friedrich von Schelling, his associated discussion of nation remains a fixture of institutional criticism, while his occasional notations on language proved seminal for the foundation and development of Cambridge English in the 1920s. In his distinction between culture and civilization, Coleridge supplied means for a critique of the utilitarian state, which has been continuing in our own time. And in his late theological writing, he provided principles for reform in the Church of England. Coleridge's various and imposing achievement, a cornerstone of modern English culture, remains an incomparable source of informed reflection on the brave new world whose birth pangs he attended. Anyway, let me see if I can get something about his actual stuff. There's a lot about him in this. One moment. Oh, I guess it's just. Coleridge died in 1834 after years of personal discomfort and disappointment. A legend in his time, he came to be seen by friends and contemporaries as the genius who failed. The failure was largely relative to early expectations, however, and to hopes defeated by disease and drugs. Despite everything, Coleridge can still be regarded as a groundbreaking and, at his best, a powerful poet of lasting influence. I do remember reading something about how he was a bit of a hermit because of his mental, like he had a very poor mental health. Anyway, on to the poetry itself. This is a fragment, so it isn't very long, but there are, of course, multiples of these credited to Coleridge. But again, in keeping in the spirit of the channel, I chose this one to read as an appetizer to the much larger Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Fragment 2. I know 'tis but a dream, yet feel more anguish than if 'twere truth. It has been often so. Must I die under it? Is no one near? Will no one hear these stifled groans and wake me? Obviously, a digestion of the work will be longer than the reading of it, but I liked it anyway because it brings about a certain flavor of desperation everyone feels, but it's sometimes hard to describe. Anyway, its brevity is compensated for by the lengthier Rime of the Ancient Mariner. Argument. How a ship having passed the line was driven by storms to the cold country towards the South Pole, and how from thence she made her course to the tropical latitude of the great Pacific Ocean, and of the strange things that befell, and what manner the ancient mariner came back to his own country. Part 1. It is an ancient mariner, and he stoppeth one of three. By thy long grey beard and glittering eye, now wherefore stopp'st thou me? The bridegroom's doors are opened wide, and I am next of kin. The guests are met, the feast is set, mayst hear the merry din. He holds him with his skinny hand. There was a ship, quoth he. Hold off, unhand me, grey-beard loon. Eftsoons his hand dropped he. He holds him with his glittering eye. The wedding guest stood still, and listens like a 3 years' child. The mariner hath his will. The wedding guest sat on a stone. He cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. The ship was cheered, the harbor cleared, merrily did we drop, below the kirk, below the hill, below the lighthouse top. The sun came up upon the left, out of the sea came he, And he shone bright, and on the right went down into the sea. Higher and higher every day, till over the mast at noon, the wedding guest here beat his breast, for he heard the loud bassoon. The bride had paced into the hall, red as a rose is she, nodding their heads before her goes the merry minstrelsy. Sorry about that. The wedding guest he beat his breast, yet he cannot choose but hear. And thus spake on that ancient man, the bright-eyed mariner. And now the storm blast came, and he was tyrannous and strong. He struck with his o'ertaking wings, and chased us south along. With sloping masts and dipping prow, as who pursued with yell and blow, still treads the shadow of his foe, and forward bends his head. The ship drove fast, loud roared the blast, and southward, aye, we fled. And now there came both mist and snow, and it grew wondrous cold. An ice mast high came floating by, as green as emerald. And through the drifts the snowy cliffs did send a dismal sheen. Nor shapes of men nor beasts we ken, the ice was all between. The ice was here, the ice was there, the ice was all around. It cracked and growled and roared and howled like noises in a swound. At length did cross an albatross. Thorough the fog it came, as if had been a Christian soul. We hailed it in God's name. It ate the food it ne'er had eat, and round it flew. The ice did split with a thunder fit, the helmsman steered us through. And a good south wind sprung up behind, the albatross did follow. And every day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. In mist or cloud, on mast or shroud, it perched for vespers 9, whilst all the night through fog smoke white glimmered the white moonshine. God save thee, ancient mariner, from the fiends that plague thee thus. Why look'st thou so? With my crossbow I shot the albatross. Part 2. The sun now rose upon the right. Out of the sea came he, still hid in mist, and on the left went down into the sea. And the good south wind still blew behind, but no sweet bird did follow, nor any day for food or play came to the mariner's hollow. And I had done a hellish thing, and it would work him woe, for all averred I had killed the bird that made the breeze to blow. Ah, wretch, said they, the bird to slay, that made the breeze to blow. Nor dim nor red, like God's own head, the glorious sun uprist. Then all averred I had killed the bird that brought the fog and mist. 'Twas right, they said, such birds to slay. 'Twas right, said they, such birds to slay, that brings the fog and mist. The fair breeze blew, the white foam flew, the furrow followed free. We were the first that ever burst into that silent sea. Down dropped the breeze, the sails dropped down. 'Twas sad as sad could be, and we did speak only to break the silence of the sea. All in a hot and copper sky, the bloody sun at noon, right up above the mast did stand, no bigger than the moon. Day after day, day after day, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Water, water everywhere, and all the boards did shrink. Water, water everywhere, nor any drop to drink. The very deep did rot, O Christ, that ever this should be. Yea, slimy things did crawl with legs upon the slimy sea. About, about, and reel and rout, the death fires danced at night. The water, like a witch's oils, burnt green and blue and white. And some in dreams assured were of the spirit that plagued us so. 9 fathom deep he had followed us from the land of mist and snow. And every tongue, through utter drought, was withered at the root. Actually, we could not speak, no more than if we had been choked with soot. Ah, well a day, what evil looks had I from old and young. Instead of the cross, the albatross about my neck was hung. Part 3. There passed a weary time. Each throat was parched and glazed each eye. A weary time, a weary time. How glazed each weary eye. When looking westward I beheld a something in the sky. At first it seemed a little speck, and then it moved, and then it seemed a mist. It moved, and took at last a certain shape I wist. A speck, a mist, a shape I wist, and still it neared and neared. As if it dodged a water sprite, it plunged and tacked and veered. With throats unslaked, with black lips baked, we could nor laugh nor wail. Through utter drought, all dumb we stood. I bit my arm, I sucked the blood, and cried, "A sail! A sail!" With throats unslaked, with black lips baked, agape they heard me call. Gramercy, they for joy did grin, and all at once their breath drew in, as they were drinking all. "See, see," I cried, "she tacks no more, hither to work us weal. Without a breeze, without a tide, she steadies with upright keel." The western wave was all aflame, the day was well nigh done. Almost upon the western wave rested the broad bright sun, when that strange shape drove suddenly betwixt us and the sun. And straight the sun was flecked with bars. Heaven's mother send us grace! As if through a dungeon grate he peered, with broad and burning face. Alas, thought I, and my heart beat loud, how fast she nears and nears! Are those her sails that glance at the sun like restless gossameres? Are those her ribs through which the sun did peer as through a grate? And is that woman all her crew? Is that a death, and are there two? Is death that woman's mate? Her lips were red, her looks were free, her locks were yellow as gold. Her skin was as white as leprosy, the nightmare life and death was she, who thicks man's blood with cold. The naked hulk alongside came, and the twain were casting dice. "The game is done, I've won," quoth she, and whistles thrice. The sun's rim dips, the stars rush out. At one stride comes the dark, with far heard whisper o'er the sea, off shot the spectre bark. We listened and looked sideways up, fear at my heart as at a cup. My life blood seemed to sip. The stars were dim and thick the night, The steersman's face by his lamp gleamed white. From the sails the dew did drip, till clomb above the eastern bar the horned moon with one bright star within the nether tip. One after one, by the star-dogged moon, too quick for groan or sigh, each turned his face with a ghastly pang, and cursed me with his eye. 4 times 50 living men, and I heard nor sigh nor groan. With heavy thump, a lifeless lump, they dropped down one by one. The souls did from their bodies fly, they fled to bliss or woe, and every soul it passed me by like the whiz of my crossbow. Part 4. I fear thee, ancient mariner, I fear thy skinny hand, and thou art long and lank and brown, as is the ribbed sea sand. I fear thee in thy glittering eye, and thy skinny hand so brown. Fear not, thou wedding guest, this body dropped not down. Alone, alone, all alone, alone on a wide, wide sea, and never a saint took pity on my soul in agony. The many men so beautiful, they all dead did lie, and 1,000,000 slimy things lived on, and so did I. I looked upon the rotting sea, and drew my eyes away. I looked upon the rotting deck, and there the dead men lay. I looked to heaven and tried to pray, but wherever a prayer had gushed, a wicked whisper came and made my heart as dry as dust. I closed my lids and kept them closed, and the balls like pulses beat. For the sky and the sea, and the sea and the sky, lay dead like a load on my weary eye, and the dead were at my feet. The cold sweat melted from their limbs, nor rot nor reek did they. The look with which they looked on me had never passed away. An orphan's curse would drag to hell a spirit from on high. But oh, more horrible than that is the curse in a dead man's eye. 7 days, 7 nights I saw that curse, and yet I could not die. The moving moon went up the sky, and nowhere did abide. Softly she was going up, and a star or two beside. Her beams bemocked the sultry main, like April hoarfrost spread. But where the ship's huge shadow lay, the charmed water burnt alway, a still and awful red. Beyond the shadow of the ship, I watched the water snakes. They moved in tracks of shining white, and when they reared, the elfish light fell off in hoary flakes. Within the shadow of the ship, I watched their rich attire, blue, glossy green, and velvet black. They coiled and swam, and every track was a flash of golden fire. O happy living things! No tongue their beauty might declare. The spring of love gushed from my heart, and I blessed them unaware. Sure, my kind saint took pity on me, and I blessed them unaware. The selfsame moment I could pray, and from my neck so free, the albatross fell off and sank like lead into the sea. Part 5. Oh, sleep, it is a gentle thing, beloved from pole to pole. To Mary Queen the praise be given, she sent the gentle sleep from heaven that slid into my soul. The silly buckets on the deck that had so long remained, I dreamt that they were filled with dew, and when I awoke it rained. My lips were wet, my throat was cold, my garments all were dank. Sure I had drunken in my dreams, and still my body drank. I moved and could not feel my limbs. I was so light almost. I thought that I had died in sleep and was a blessed ghost. And soon I heard a roaring wind. It did not come anear, but with its sound it shook the sails that were so thin and sere. The upper air burst into life, and 100 fire flags sheen. To and fro they were hurried about, and to and fro and in but out the wan stars danced between. And the coming wind did roar more loud, and the sails did sigh like sedge, and the rain poured down from one black cloud. The moon was at its edge. The thick black cloud was cleft, and still the moon was at its side. Like water shot from some high crag, the lightning fell with never a jag, a river steep and wide. The loud wind never reached the ship, yet now the ship moved on. Beneath the lightning and the moon, the dead men gave a groan. They groaned, they stirred, they all uprose, nor spake nor moved their eyes. It had been strange, even in a dream, to have seen those dead men rise. The helmsman steered, the ship moved on, yet never a breeze up blew. The mariners all again worked the ropes, where they were wont to do. They raised their limbs like lifeless tools. We were a ghastly crew. The body of my brother's son stood by me, knee to knee. The body and I pulled at one rope, but he said naught to me. I fear thee, ancient mariner. Be calm, thou wedding guest. 'Twas not those souls that fled in pain, which to their course came again, but a troop of spirits blessed. For when it dawned, they dropped their arms and clustered around the mast. Sweet sounds rose slowly through their mouths, and from their bodies passed. Around flew each sweet sound, then darted to the sun. Slowly sounds came back again, now mixed, now one by one. Sometimes a dropping from the sky, I heard the skylark sing. Sometimes all little birds that are, how they seem to fill the sea and air with their sweet jargoning. And now 'twas like all instruments, now like a lonely flute, and now it is an angel's song that makes the heavens be mute. It ceased, yet still the sails made on, a pleasant noise till noon, a noise like of a hidden brook in the leafy month of June, that to the sleeping woods all night singeth a quiet tune. Till noon we quietly sailed on, yet never a breeze did breathe. Slowly and smoothly went the ship, moved onward from beneath. Under the keel 9 fathom deep, from the land of mist and snow, the spirit slid, and it was he that made the ship to go. The sails at noon left off their tune, and the ship stood still also. The sun, right up above the mast, had fixed her to the ocean, but in a minute she began stir, with a short uneasy motion. Backwards and forwards half her length, with a short uneasy motion. Then, like a pawing horse let go, she made a sudden bound. It flung the blood into my head, and I fell down and swound. How long in the same fit I lay, I have not to declare, but ere my living life returned, I heard in my soul discerned 2 voices in the air. Is it he, quoth one? Is this the man? By him who died on the cross, with his cruel bow he laid full low the harmless albatross? The spirit who bideth by himself in the land of mist and snow, he loved the bird that loved the man who shot him with his bow. The other was a softer voice, as soft as honeydew. Quoth he, the man hath penance none, and the penance more will do. Part 6. First voice. But tell me, speak again, thy soft response renewing. What makes that ship drive on so fast? Why is the ocean doing? Second voice. Still as a slave before his lord, the ocean hath no blast. His great bright eye most silently up to the moon is cast, if he may know which way to go, for she guides him smoother grim. See, brother, see, how graciously she looketh down upon him. First voice. But why drives on that ship so fast, without or wave or wind? Second voice. The air is cut away before, and closes from behind. Fly, brother, fly, more high, or we shall be belated. For slow and slow that ship will go, when the mariner's trance is abated. I woke, and we were sailing on as in a gentle weather. 'Twas night, a calm night, the moon was high, the dead men stood together. All stood together on the deck, for a charnel dungeon fitter. All fixed on me their stony eyes, that in the moon did glitter. The pang, the curse with which they died, had never passed away. I could not draw my eyes from theirs, nor turn them up to pray. And now the spell was snapped once more. I viewed the ocean green, and looked far forth, yet little saw of what had else been seen. Like one that on a lonesome road doth walk in fear and dread, and having once turned round walks on, and turns no more his head, because he knows a frightful fiend doth close behind him tread. But soon there breathed a wind on me, nor sound nor motion made. Its path was not upon the sea, in ripple or in shade. It raised my hair, it fanned my cheek like a meadow gale of spring. It mingled strangely with my fears, yet it felt like a welcoming. Swiftly, swiftly flew the ship, yet she sailed softly too. Sweetly, sweetly blew the breeze. On me alone it blew. Oh, dream of joy, is this indeed the lighthouse top I see? Is this the hill? Is this the kirk? Is this mine own country? We drifted o'er the harbor bar, and with sobs did I pray. Oh, let me be awake, my God, or let me sleep alway. The harbor bay was clear as glass, so smoothly it was strewn, and on the bay the moonlight lay, in the shadow of the moon. The rock shone bright, the kirk no less, the stands above the rock. The moonlight steeped in silentness the steady weathercock, and the bay was white with silent light, till rising from the same, full many shapes that shadows were, in crimson colors came. A little distance from the prow, those crimson shadows were. I turned my eyes upon the deck. O Christ, what I saw there! Each corse lay flat, lifeless and flat, and by the holy rood, a man all light, a seraph man, on every corse there stood. This seraph man each waved his hand. It was a heavenly sight. They stood as signals to the land, each one a lovely light. This seraph band each waved his hand. No voice did they impart. No voice, but oh, the silence sank like music on my heart. But soon I heard the dash of oars. I heard the pilot's cheer. My head was turned perforce away, and I saw a boat appear. The pilot and the pilot's boy, I heard them coming fast. Dear Lord in heaven, it was a joy the dead man could not blast. I saw a third, I heard his voice. It is the hermit good. He singeth loud his godly hymns. that he makes in the wood. He'll shrieve my soul, he'll wash away the albatross's blood. Part 7. This hermit good lives in that wood, which slopes down to the sea. How loudly his sweet voice he rears, he loves to talk with mariners that come from a far country. He kneels at morn, and noon, and eve, he hath a cushion plump. It is the moss that wholly hides the rotted old oak stump. The skiff boat neared, I heard them talk. Why, this is strange, I trow. Where are those lights so many and fair, that signal made but now? Strange by my faith, the hermit said, and they answered not our cheer. The planks look warped, and see the sails, how thin they are and sere. I never saw aught like to them, unless perchance it were brown skeletons of leaves that lag my forest brook along, when the ivy tod is heavy with snow, and the owlet whoops to the wolves below, that eat the she-wolf's young. Dear Lord, it hath but a fiendish look, the pilot made reply. I am afeard. Push on, said the hermit cheerily. The boat came closer to the ship, but I nor spake nor stirred. The boat came close beneath the ship, and straight a sound was heard. Under the water it rumbled on, still louder and more dread. It reached the ship, it split the bay, the ship went down like lead. Stunned by that loud and dreadful sound, which sky and ocean smote, like one that hath been 7 days drowned, my body lay afloat. But swift as dreams myself I found within the pilot's boat. Upon the whirl where sank the ship, the boat spun round and round, and all was still save that hill was telling of the sound. I moved my lips, the pilot shrieked, and fell down in a fit. The holy hermit raised his eyes and prayed where he did sit. I took the oars, the pilot's boy, who now doth crazy go, laughed loud and long, and all the while his eyes went to and fro. Ha ha, quoth he, full plain I see, the devil knows how to row. And now, all in my own country, I stood on the firm land. The hermit stepped forth from the boat, and scarcely he could stand. Oh, shrieve me, O holy man! The hermit crossed his brow. Say quick, quoth he, I bid thee say, what manner of man art thou? Forthwith this frame of mine was wrenched with a woeful agony, which forced me to begin my tale, and then it left me free. Since then, at an uncertain hour, that agony returns, and till my ghostly tale is told, this heart within me burns. I pass, like night, from land to land. I have strange power of speech. That moment that his face I see, I know the man that must hear me. To him I tell, my tale I teach. What loud uproar bursts from that door? The wedding guests are there. But in the garden bower the bride and bridemaids singing are. And hark the little vesper bell, which biddeth me to prayer. O wedding guest, this soul hath been alone on a wide, wide sea. So lonely 'twas that God himself scarce seemed to be there to be. O sweeter than the marriage feast, 'tis sweeter far to me, to walk together to the kirk with a goodly company. To walk together to the kirk, and all together pray, while each to his great Father bends, old men and babes and loving friends, and youths and maidens gay. Farewell, farewell, but this I tell, To thee, thou wedding guest, he prayeth well who loveth well both man and bird and beast. He prayeth best who loveth best all things doth great and small, for the dear God who loveth us, he made and loveth all. The mariner, whose eye is bright, whose beard with age is hoar, is gone, and now the wedding guest turned from the bridegroom's door. He went like one that hath been stunned, and is of sense forlorn, a sadder and wiser man. He rose the morrow morn.